Hi, my name is Jordan Crossley, and I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Dan Levitt. I am a gaming and event coordinator for Comic-Con Africa, working at Reed Exhibitions Africa. I'm going to hand over to Dan to just quickly introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Dan Levitt. I'm the CEO and founder of LongHaul Management. We represent a lot of the top gaming, sports, and film digital creators. And so our job is to help them turn what's often a successful or growing, digital channel or, social media channel into a diversified, media business.
So yeah, I don't know, Dan, if you'd like to tell the audience more about the influencers that you manage and the different portfolios and maybe also some of the brands they represent. And then we can really start unpacking each of those brands and the influencer kind of pairing you made.
Sure. So I've been representing influencers since 2012. I got started in the music business as an A&R guy, working for Sony and Disney, and I saw around that time that YouTube was becoming a bigger platform, and that the audience was moving away from places like Disney Channel and Radio Disney to YouTube, and people were doing their original songs or covers on YouTube and building a big audience. But I noticed there wasn't too much artist development in that space. No one was helping them really have strategy, behind how they were growing their audience or how they were sort of doing new streams. And so I thought that would be a good fit for me, especially because I wasn't having much success. Even though I was working for big companies, they weren't listening to the artists that I was trying to get signed. So there were a few companies at the time, at least here in the US, that were starting to represent YouTubers. And so I got offers from the top 3 companies there, chose the one that was the best fit for me. At that point, those companies called multi-channel networks really only participated in the ad revenue for the channels that they partnered with. So the value proposition was, hey, we're going to help provide you support and strategy on how to grow your audience and better monetize, and in exchange, we'll take a percentage of the ad revenue. And what happened with that model is, instead of investing heavily in providing services for those channels, some of the companies decided, hey, let's just sign as many channels as we could so that we could take a bunch of ad revenue from them. I chose to work for a company that was much more high touch and was really interested in really building out and providing a bunch of services for channels. Once I started in that role, I very quickly saw, this was 2012, 2013, we saw other platforms like Instagram and other, platforms pop up, and all of a sudden there started to be inquiries around live events and merch and all these other revenue streams that the MCNs weren't participating in yet, because the deal structure was around YouTube ad revenue. And so I realized early on that the only way it made sense for me to do what I want to do, which is be high touch with a few select channels, was to be a more 360 participant and a manager that helps them with all the different things they have going on. And so I started on the music side, and then after about a year, I went off on my own. And there was someone I met there who was had their own channel, but was also working in audience development. That ended up being my path, who now has, I think well over 20 million subscribers across his 4 channels. So his content's a bit like Mythbusters for video games. So there's a gaming channel, there's also a film channel, now there's a food channel, and there's also a live streaming channel. So we've helped him sort of build out into different verticals. And so when I started, I'd never done brand deals before, but I knew I had a channel that had a huge amount of viewership. And so I happened to be working in a co-working space. Actually, WeWork. I was working out of a WeWork doing some consulting for a tech company, and then just starting up my management company. And there was a company there that was used to work in radio on the sales side, and now had started with podcasters. And they were sort of the intermediary between brands and podcasts, helping do media buys. And they were just dipping their toes into YouTube. And I was like, hey, I have a friend who has a big channel. Like, let's see how it does, And I think we promoted like Hulu, which is a streaming service here. And I remember, I just threw out a number and they right away said yes. I was like, oh man, I probably should have asked for more, but we were really excited, and there was a multiple of what we typically would get, what he would typically get on the ad revenue side. And then I remember it went up on a Thursday evening, and then Friday morning I had a call. Hey, Dan, we have 3 other brands that each want to book 3 videos. And I was like, okay, so clearly it works. So then all of a sudden I had booked a pretty significant amount of, revenue for my one client. But the problem was now I'd sold out most of his inventory because we didn't want every video to be sponsored. And so as an example of like what the deal was, is he basically, for 45 to 60 seconds at the end of his video, he hit, specific talking points and had a call to action to drive people to sign up. And with a unique code specific to him. So they were able to see that, hey, there was huge viewership and huge signups, and whatever their cost per acquisition goal was, he was crushing it. And so they're like, hey, let's buy all the inventory before Dan knows what he's doing. And so then with most of the inventory, sold out, at least on the direct response side, that gave me some time to be like, hey, he's getting millions of views talking about, video games, and does it in a really thoughtful way. Because most gaming channels are just Let's Plays. They're just playing the game. His is really, a cross of gaming and education. So it's a little more highbrow. It's a little more thoughtful. It takes a lot longer to produce. But the format is structured where it's very easy to work in talking points that a brand or a game might want. So, and I didn't really have too many relationships with video game publishers. So I was just like, hey, who do I know that works in gaming? And one of my buddies from high school was working for one of the biggest mobile game publishers in marketing. So I hit him up and I was like, hey, have you done any YouTube integrations? He's like, we've bought ad revenue, but we actually haven't done integrations with the channel. But like, sure, we'll test. The one nice thing about the gaming industry is they'll test stuff and they're pretty quick to try things, and if it works, sort of like dial it up, especially mobile gaming. So we ended up doing a video where my client did a video talking about like what makes mobile games addictive, using one of their games as an example. And overnight, like, again, it just crushed. And so, the next day or a few days later, he was like, hey, I have 30 mobile games a month with 5-figure budgets. How many does he want to do? And, unfortunately the audience, for my client wasn't really focused on mobile games. So we couldn't really take advantage of that. But we now had a case study on, hey, this is how we can work in, a dedicated video about, a gaming IP, and do it in a way that like is still valuable for the audience. The audience learns something new, like any opportunity that I do for my clients, the first question is like, what's the value proposition for the audience? Because if you do deals where it's inauthentic, the audience is going to call BS, and you might get away with it once, but they'll start to sour. So from there, it was like, hey, let me focus on more of the AAA publishers, and around the same time, there was sort of a YouTube convention, and there was one company that was doing a lot of the deals on the video game side. And so I sort of like met the people there, and they were working on a campaign for a new game, but they'd already allocated their budget. And it was a game that like, my client was probably going to cover anyways. So I went to him and I said, hey, look, the good news is they're interested in working with you next time. The bad news is they don't have budget for this campaign. You're going to cover this title already. Let's just give them a free video. It's going to make their numbers look better, and they're going to see how much better your video performs relative to all the ones that they're paying. And you're going to be, hopefully in the mix for the future. And so that's exactly what happened. The video ended up getting millions of views. It made their numbers look better, and they were obviously, it got their attention. And I've, with zero exaggeration, done hundreds of deals with that company since, and they've been a regular recurring sponsor. of both his channel and across my roster, as their business has grown and ours has grown. So for me, it's like, hey, if there's a lane that I want to go down with a client, it's like just get a proof of concept, even if it's not sort of, even if it doesn't drive significant revenue in the short term, because then once there's some companies and brands that can just have an imagination and get it. It's a lot easier to be like, hey, this is what we can do, but for you, that's like, okay, so really the focus is figuring out, what they want and showing them, hey, we've done this before successfully. Once we know what's important to you, we can kind of put your spin on it. So now whenever I'm approached by a new brand or as we're having those conversations, the most important thing for me is to understand, what they want to get across. What are the message points and what is the call to action? And sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they're still figuring it out. And often they might have a few things they want. And so sometimes my job is to be like, hey, we can say all those things, but you're telling the audience to do X and Y and Z, and some of them might do each, but it might make sense to just have one thing you want us to be like, like where my clients go, hey guys, do X, click here, and then drive the traffic to that. So, and having done this since like 2012, I've kind of seen, almost all the deals that are out there. There's not too much you can throw at me that I can't sort of figure out. So what's nice is often as brands are trying to figure out what they should do, I can be like, hey, I've kind of seen this before, and hey, you can do this, but here are some things to think about, Yeah. And so in terms of like my roster and what I look for, for my clients, it's kind of three things with any opportunity. It's like, is it going to drive revenue? That's pretty self-explanatory. Is it going to drive audience? Because we know how to monetize audience really well, through, ad revenue and through brand partnerships. If there's an opportunity that doesn't pay, but is going to bring an influx of new eyeballs to the channel, that has value. And then the third thing would be like, is it brand lifting, right? So we've done deals where my clients have maybe collabed with traditional athletes or celebrities for more traditional media, not digital. And that can be brand building, or if it gets us great content. So if there's an opportunity for us, like, hey, we've built this crazy maze and, it's going to explode and your client can run through it and it'll be great. Like, that's something our clients always need great content. So that's something that we also think about. And ideally we find something that kind of checks, all those boxes. Yeah.
So that was actually kind of a question I was going to ask next is, how do you kind of space out sponsored videos with, what the influencer really wants to talk about? Because
sure,
the way I would see influence working is, you've got an opinion or a point of view about something, and you share those opinions with people, and people either agree or disagree, and there's that change, right? And then of course when that helps grow the channel, and then brands start coming in eventually. But if it's just a brand channel, then why not just watch 30 minutes worth of YouTube ads?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? So one, there's kind of two kinds of deals that we do typically. There's the direct response, which is like that's typically at the end of the video. Sometimes, we'll put it earlier on, and that's more like, hey, here's a product or service that, we think you'll like, and here it is. At this point, the audience kind of gets, like there's enough people doing these that the audience kind of gets it. As long as it's done in a thoughtful way, and it's not too long and it's a brand fit, the audience will go through it, especially if you tease the video before. They get that it's a business, and, a lot of times they do want to learn about these products and services. I think where it gets more challenging is when it's a dedicated video, then you've really got to be picky. And we try and work the brand into the content, right? So it's less of an ad, it's content marketing, right? So an example is like I represent a group called 2Hype. They are sort of the top group at the intersection of sort of sports and sneaker culture and gaming. So they're playing NBA 2K, you know, but they're also doing basketball challenges in their backyard, you know, or other sort of fun, you know, hide and seek or other sort of trick shot challenges, you know. And so often what we'll do with them is if a brand comes in, be it like, you know, a Reebok or Adidas, or like we've done a bunch with cell phones or tablets or whatever, you know, basically the whatever the brand is, that's the prize, right? And the guys are competing a challenge, which is their normal content, but they're competing for the prize, right? So it works really well because it's like, you know, hey guys, today's video is sponsored by Brand X. You know, we're really excited. We're going to be doing this kind of challenge. Here's the product. Here's some cool things about it. All the guys, oh man, I'm excited. I want to win that, you know. And then they get into the challenge. So that way we're able to hit the key talking points and have some great glamour shots of the product from the get-go. And then they do the regular competition, you know, 10, 12 minutes, and we can have a branded scoreboard throughout. And then at the end, there's a clear winner, and that winner gets the prize, and they're really excited about it. And then for those who want to get it at home, there's a reminder, hey, if you want to have your own, like link in the description. So that way, the ask of the audience isn't that different. You came here to watch the guys do a challenge. You're watching that. The difference is, hey, it's a special episode, and here's kind of the prize, right? And so that's great value for the brand because they're able to be seen as kind of the prize. They get all their message points and the talking points and the driving awareness and hopefully sales, you know, in a way that's not disruptive, right? There are times where brands come and say, hey, we want the guys to do this. And if it's not something that we think the audience will dig, we're not going to do it, you know? And I'll tell them, it's like, hey, if you like, I'll ask them, but I don't think it's going to work because of X, Y, Z. And they like both the brand and our clients risk pushback and the audience will tell you if it's inauthentic. So we, you know, at this point, I've unfortunately had it go wrong once or twice, and it's not fun. So we're extremely protective to make sure that there's always kind of alignment. And we try to frame it as, hey, we got to do this cool thing because of the brand. So, you know, if there is a moment where it does seem a bit more, you know, the brand's a bit more rigid, hopefully there's significant budget there. And then we'll try to make the video a bit bigger in scale and say, hey, we got to do this really cool big thing because of, you know, the brand. And so like a perfect example of this is with my client, MatPat, we had been wanting to do a show similar to Mythbusters for gaming, but in real life. And so actually through the agency that I talked about earlier that we did the free video for, they came to us and said, hey, Ubisoft has a new Rainbow Six game coming out. It's basically like a hostage rescue. And we really want to try something new and different. What ideas do you have? And we're like, well, what if we actually trained with real Los Angeles SWAT on how to do, like, hey, what would you actually do in real life? And we will show sort of the differences between the game and real life with the understanding that, like, there are going to be differences, and the differences are because, like, hey, you can do this in the game because it's fun, but you wouldn't actually do, you can't just blow open doors and stuff, you know, in real life without knowing if someone's kind of on the other side, right? And so in that instance, the brand was really great to work with, and they understood that when we were pointing out differences, it wasn't to make fun of the game, it was more to just clarify, hey, here's what it is in real life, and here's, you know, what it is in the game, and always like A being, right? And that allowed the game to have a really great showcase, and we were able to convey the parts about the game that they wanted, but also allowed us to do something really, you know, really expensive to make and really different on the channel, and a great value to the fans. That Matt at that point hadn't really been on camera much. He was mostly voiceover, and we really wanted to build him out more as an on-camera personality because there's a bunch of benefits, you know, in doing that. And so we basically got, you know, the brand to allow us to make a pilot of a show we wanted to do anyways. and the audience was really appreciative, even though the video was like heavily branded, but done in a thoughtful way where there was a huge amount of value for the audience. They were able to learn something and see one of their favorite creators get to go through a really interesting and amazing experience. And that episode actually led us to selling that as a series to YouTube, where they gave us, you know, a big pot of money to make it as a series for his channel, which ended up having huge, like there were billboards in Hollywood with his face on it. It was crazy, but you know, and it all led from us doing that free video, kind of got us in the door, you know.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the questions that I was writing down, you actually answered as we were going along. So yeah, I think you pretty much, I'm going to ask the question anyway.
Yeah, I'm happy to dive deeper into anything.
What is your process when it comes to kind of, you know, do you pair the brand to the influencer, or is it the other way around? Do the brands come and say, we want MatPat?
Sure. It's both. I mean, when I started, it was me going out to the brands and knocking on doors. You know, I'd read an article and I'd be, oh, this company's interesting. I'd find someone on LinkedIn and I'd kind of hit them up. So to start, it was very much like me out there hustling, knocking on doors, going to conventions, you know, meeting people and just doing whatever I could to get the case studies, you know, and making sure that they had a great experience. Fortunately, I've been doing this for so long that most of my business is repeat. And so it's this, like, you know, people know that I have gaming and sports and kind of like streetwear, and I sort of have the male audience. So a lot of it is recurring, especially on the direct response side. You know, there's a lot of repeat business. You know, if my clients can drive brands at a cost that the brand's happy with, then let's lock it in and have those be, you know, regular. But there is still, you know, we still try to be proactive in outreach. If I see a brand that's interesting that I think would be a great fit, we will try and go out to them. But, you know, or if there's a brand that we see spending with other channels, we'll try and figure out how to get there. So, yeah, it's luckily now it's more recurring and a bit of inbound, where they'll email us directly, or, you know, we have emails set for each of our clients on the contact info that will come to us. We'll vet them, you know, but we still do some outreach, and, you know, at this point, there's, you know, hundreds of different agencies that we've worked with over the years. And so we try to have a regular, like, hey, it's been a while, what are you working on? You know, yeah.
Wow. So that's quite cool. And I think a lot of the brands will really appreciate that kind of approach. Because
it's
gaming influence here in South Africa it's starting to really pick up and grow. It's still kind of in its dawning phases. Brands are a bit kind of, I would say, hesitant, or it kind of don't understand what everything is, and is this actually a good ROI?
Sure. And I think it's like, and this is even something, especially with COVID, there's a lot of brands and agencies that all of a sudden are like, oh, gaming, you know, like, because gaming's been big, right? But really over the last few months, it's been like, you know, there's a lot of brands that are like all of a sudden interested in gaming and in esports. And so because I've been doing it so long, there's a lot of brands that I've worked with more on the sports side that are now being like, hey, the same brands are coming to, you know, us as an agency and asking, hey, what can we do in gaming? And, you know, Dan, we know you're in that world. Can you help sort of walk us through that? And so I've been having a lot of conversations on like, hey, when brands are asking for esports, like esports as a term is still a bit sort of vague, because what I consider esports is actual competitive, you know, teams that are playing a specific title, or there's a company that owns teams across titles and are playing that title competitively in like a championship series. But it's also sometimes used to cover gaming influencers. you know? And so my thing was, hey, what, like, they're saying they want to like sponsor esports. Do they actually want a team? Because as a team, here's what you get. And it's like, you might not have the same personalities, because a lot of people who just play games all day, they can be they can be more introverted. Or do they want more gaming personalities, which are a bit more extroverted? They're going to be able to, you know, probably crank out more content in terms of like videos and integrations, and you know, just sort of like defining what the different options are. And so, you know, on our end, we don't really represent too many esports players. We're more on the sort of gaming influencer side, and we found that is what a lot of brands want. But there are a lot of brands that do want their logo on the jersey and to be a title sponsor for teams. The same way that, you know, in football and rugby, they're sort of title sponsors, right? So it's definitely something where I would say on the brand side, I think it's like, if you're a brand and you want to like lean into gaming, I would say start with a gaming influencer, you know, have a very clear, specific, like, here's the one thing we want to get across, and here's the one call to action we want people to have, you know, and just, you know, place a few small bets and see what you like and kind of learn, you know, or find someone who's sort of been in the industry for, you know, but like, and on the other side, if you're an agency or you're someone on the representation side, do whatever you can to get those first few deals and make sure they crush and sort of under promise and over deliver. Because like, what I always tell my employees is like, brands are coming and agencies are coming to us to solve a problem, right? And our job is to like solve that problem for them. And we need to be the experts. We're the ones who have done more of these deals. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to be like, hey, we shouldn't do that because here's the possible problems. Like, I've been able to stop problems from occurring in deals because I've kind of seen things happen. So, but if you can have success with a few brands and start getting a repeat business, that makes everything easier, right? Because now when I go out and try to sign new clients, it's like, hey, I can take you into our roster and start bringing you deals right away because I have that trust. I can go to the direct response brands that I've worked with and be like, hey, I have a new channel. I think they're going to do great. Here are the brands that I think would work. Like, let's do some tests, you know? And then on the, you know, and the direct response is like probably the foundation of my business, right? So if most of my clients have audience that's a bit older, you know, I don't have too many of like the Fortnite where they're like just 8-year-old kids watching, because 8-year-old kids don't buy all that much. They might buy Fortnite currency, but they're not buying razors and, you know, other stuff. We try to have clients that have sort of an audience that's, you know, 15 to 40, you know, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So after the previous question that I asked, you mentioned that it went wrong once or twice.
Sure.
Are you comfortable speaking about what happened and kind of how you solved it on both the influencer to their fans, as well as with the brands? You know, you wouldn't need to go into specifics or anything.
Yeah, I would say there's a few cases where it's kind of gone wrong, and it's really where the brand and the channel don't fit. So again, I kind of talked a little bit about mobile games before. There's some audiences that are a bit more hardcore gaming, you know, that this was years ago, and mobile gaming is a lot kind of more accepted now. But there were years back where it felt a bit, the gaming audience, as you may know, can be intense and hardcore and very opinionated. And so at that time, they felt pretty negative about mobile games in general. And so one of our clients did a video just honestly talking about mobile games and thought that it had a bright future and thought, hey, this is sort of like, hey, here's a genre that you like, and we see this mobile game actually as the next evolution of that. And even though that like has now turned out to be true, the audience didn't want to hear it at the time, and they felt that he only said that because he was being paid to, not because he actually believed it. And so one thing we've tried to do is, in general, if we are going to work with a brand, make sure that sort of the opinion is kind of separated from it, you know? So like, or if we're doing something that's going to be a bit, well, one, I think if we are taking a stance that might be ahead of its time or somewhat controversial, we want to make sure that that's probably not the best way to partner with, you know, with a brand. You know, we've done it in other instances where, you know, that's been fine, but especially with mobile games or with topics that might be a bit sensitive, we try to stay away from anytime the audience can be like, oh, you only think that because you're being paid to. We try and stay, you know, away from that. And it's a fine line because, you know, there's people who wear clothes and sneakers and like, oh, I like this, it feels great for me, and others might differ. But I think, you know, if we're going to be talking about a movie or a game, you know, it's more like, hey, this is what we find interesting about it, you know, and maybe we don't say if it's good or bad, but like, hey, this is something that like we wanted to share with you, and here's one or two like really interesting things that, you know, about it, you know, and not so much make like, I represent a few of the top movie review channels on YouTube. They won't work with movie studios because they want to have that kind of journalistic integrity, right? So, you know, but they might promote sort of a streaming service that has a bunch of films, right? So that's kind of like the fine line there.
Sure. Yeah. So it seems like it's a very delicate balance between, you know, how you pair the brands with the influencer, with the audience, and
yeah,
that takes a lot of data and a lot of kind of insight into the needs and desires of your audience. You know, in terms of the data, what core metrics do you look at when you're pairing the brands with the influencers?
sure.
As the first part, and then as the second part, if you're prepared to share it, how do you kind of use data to grow channels or be part of the process?
Yeah. So on the brand side, it's more, on the brand side, it's really like, you know, what's the metric that they're looking for? On the direct response side, it's very simple. They want to drive conversions, right? And so it's making sure that there's a fit between the audience that they're looking to hit, be it age and gender and location, to like, that's who the channel has, right? And making sure there's sort of alignment there. And then whenever possible, if we can get back the conversion information, sometimes we don't get it, sometimes we do. That's always great to have, right? Because that way it's like, hey, I have certain channels that get similar viewership, but I know channel B for this product is going to convert a lot better, right? And but you know, for a different product like channel A might, right? So it's about it's kind of about fit there. In terms of like, you know, the growing channels, you know, it's still an evolution. We try and have a, you know, for our larger clients, a partner for them on the YouTube side as well, that, hey, like, you know, we as a company have relationships with YouTube. Whenever there's an issue with one of our clients' videos, be it monetization or whatever, we have someone we can come in and try to fix it right away, or at least like have it looked at. In terms of actually, you know, growing their audience, it's really starting with like, hey, what's the content that's resonating? Why, you know, and kind of why is it resonating? And let's try to have like, you know, like what's a format that's working? Let's try and like, you know, build that out. And let's also see, hey, what where is viewership sort of dropping, right? So with at least YouTube, there's very robust analytics in terms of like retention time. So you can see, hey, if this video, once you did this, the audience went away. So hey, let's think about how to tweak that, you know? And then, you know, what's nice about our roster now is we can take someone who's kind of still up and coming and partner with them, you know, for certain formats. They can do a collab with people that we have that have a larger audience, and that can help sort of, you know, build them up.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's the question everybody was waiting for me to ask pretty much. Is just Jordan, just ask, how do we grow the channel?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like there are a few specific YouTube channels and resources. Like I got really deep into that. Candidly, I'm not, like, most of my time is spent finding like revenue opportunities for our clients, and less so the day-to-day sort of audience building, though that's definitely an arm we continue to sort of invest in and hope to build out further. But it's really like you have to become obsessed with the analytics and kind of the A/B testing. And there's a few like that's how MatPat's grown, you know, his channels. And there are great resources online. There's a few links that, you know, Jordan, I can send them to you and you can include them in the, you know, later on. But there's a few channels that are focused on, you know, hey, how to optimize your thumbnails, you know, which is hugely important. You know, how to optimize titles, what, you know, what your content should be. And it's going to be different for each kind of case, but there are some sort of, you know, principles that, you know, work across most channels, and it changes, right? Like, you know, like Instagram, for example, is now rolling out Reels, and that's going to be a different tab. So there's going to be a strategy like, hey, when should you put stuff on Reels on the feed? You know, when should it be just in Reels separate? So there's all these, like, that's what's really interesting about this space is there's new stuff all the time. And even for us, man, like the social media deals, an Instagram deal is harder than YouTube because there's more levers. YouTube's very easy. Hey, put the 45 seconds in the video and it goes live. You know, on Instagram, it's like, hey, you've got to use this tool to tag it, and the hashtags, which need to be clickable, and the paid partner, like there's a lot, you know. So, you know, and there's more iterations to those platforms. You know, they're all becoming e-commerce platforms now. So now it's like, hey, you're promoting the thing, but now you can actually buy the thing, you know, on Instagram. So, you know, that's what's sort of like fun and frustrating about it, where it's like, hey, we'll be doing a deal, and then in the middle of it, they can roll out a new feature, and now each side has to figure out how to actually, you know, do it properly.
Sure. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Dan.
Sure.
If you have anything you'd like to say to either aspiring brands who would like to, you know, grow their reach by using influencers, or you know, young and avid streamers who aspire to be like MatPat or some of the other influencers that you have.
Yeah, I would say it's a marathon. You know, there's a lot of interest in this space, and just start, just dip your toes. If you're a brand, I can tell you, like, the influencers can really move the needle. I've done deals that have crashed apps for Skype. We've sold out of all kinds of stuff. Like, it's really hard to get your message in front of like young people to care. It's really hard. And so a great way to do that is to partner with a creator that's already doing that and be part of the content, right? But you've got to make sure that if you do that as a brand, you need to understand their turf, right? They're the distribution, and it's about taking what you do and putting that through the prism of the creator, you know? So try a few different things, you know, like, you know, spend your money in a few different places, see what you like and get a couple learnings, and then sort of dial up what works. And then on the creator side, look, it's competitive, and whatever you like, you also have to think, like, whatever format you try and do, like, you might be stuck with it for a while. You know, MatPat, he did his format, which is very post heavy and takes a long time to do because that's the only way he could do it then. He's now, for better or worse, stuck with a really challenging format to crank out weekly, right? Compared to someone who can just like turn the camera on and play a game, right? So, you know, whatever you're going to do, you're going to have to do it so much that you better enjoy it, you know? So, you know, find your lane and, you know, try different things, but, you know, understand the platform that you're on and what works. Like, you know, people want to jump into this space and just think they're going to get eyeballs. It's like, you wouldn't just open a restaurant without actually, like, hopefully without researching the area, what the competition is, what there's unmet demand for. Like, for me in my business, I saw years ago everyone going into gaming. I had a good gaming presence there and I built it out and I'm still that. But like now I have all the big sports guys. I saw the gaming was getting more competitive and I was like, I can either just try and, you know, outgun everyone or like, let me still stay in that world. But also here's this like wide open thing of sports that no one's sort of exploring. And I'm just going to own that space. Like I'm the guy, you know? And so that's worked really well for me because I can sort of like play both sides.
Yeah. I think we're going to cut the session here.
Cool.
If anyone has any questions, there will be a email address that might pop up either after or below. And then you can direct those questions to the email address and we will direct the questions.